As it's 2024 now, and in January, a lot of people make resolutions for what they would like to achieve in the new year. And even if we may not necessarily make goals, I think right now is a good time to reflect on what our investing values might be, given that, a lot of people take a chance to take a step back and reflect on what they accomplished in the previous year and what they'd like to see in the following year. So you're listening to the Investing Mastermind Podcast. I'm Michelle Markey.
And I'm Sina Lundholt.
And Sina, now that it's the new year, have you had any thoughts about what your investing outlook might be?
Well, for me, I definitely hope that I will be able to buy some more wonderful businesses this year. 2023 was not a good year. I only bought one company that was trading at a great price, but it wasn't a year where necessarily there was a whole lot I could scoop up, at least from my wish list of wonderful businesses. So 2024, even though it's never nice when the stock market goes down, I do hope that, I can use some of the cash I have to purchase some companies. But in terms of, my outlook for, if there are certain companies or anything I want to change, not per se. I think that, when I look toward management, I do see some changes, and also something I can recognize from my own life, that, you don't have to struggle through life and work all the time and clock in all the time. So, if there is management or a leader of a business that says, life is not 100% all about the business. I'm 100% committed to the business, but at the same time, I also want to, when I'm on vacation, go on vacation and enjoy that time. I think that would be great to see some leadership teams actually change that, instead of, stressing through life and struggling through life and things like that. That's something that, I'd like to see more of from companies, and also actually saying it's okay that employees don't check in from their holiday and things like that. I did that a lot in my career.
Wow.
When I was in my professional life. And of course, now I have my own business. So whatever time I put into it is my time, but at least I don't want to, grind, or whatever you call it.
Yeah, for sure. So a work-life balance is something you're hoping to see that a company might practice, and not just slave drive their employees, or, make profits no matter what the human toll is.
Yeah, the work-life balance thing is definitely something that I recognize from my career. Oh, it's so important. Is something I honestly said as a leader, and something that, was in all of the HR documents from the companies I've been working in. But honestly, there's a big difference between actual work-life balance and the thing we see in a lot of companies. So I hope that 2024 will be, focusing in on more of what's important outside of work, but also continue to deliver well at work. You can do both things, play hard and work hard, but that there's, that there actually is a balance, and there is a harmony. And I think we've run and run for years. It's about the next thing, achieving the next thing, and both for people, but also in businesses. And I think it's okay to look inside and see what do I really thrive doing, and how can I do more of that, so that when I go to work, I can work harder and focus better, because I enjoy my spare time. So yeah, that was a little bit maybe of a detour of what we really wanted to talk about today, but definitely something that I wouldn't mind to see more of from management. But something that we actually wanted to talk about today was also, what you and I look for in order to invest in a business, in order to actually invest with our values, as you also said, Michelle. So I'd like to throw the ball back and ask you, what are some values you look, or some of your values that you have before you invest?
I mean, some of this we ask ourselves what our own financial goals are. Like, I have some goals of wanting to increase my net worth every year, for example. Like, I keep stock at the end of the year to see how I've been performing. Have I been heading toward the direction I want to see my personal finances head toward? And so with that, it also gives me the question of what is a rate of return that I would like to see on my investments? And being that a lot of us were waiting in cash, especially if we're Buffett style investors, you kind of didn't really have high hopes for returns, I think, in 2023. Like, I kind of was expecting to get around 5% from the usual fixed income type securities, whether it was a money market or high yield savings or treasury bonds, things like that. Just gave you a kind of 5% return. But then I missed out maybe because I didn't just have that same money in an index fund that returned a more generous amount. So it's interesting that, we make these choices of thinking, okay, I don't have high hopes for the stock market this year because I'm expecting it to go down and crash because the Fed is raising interest rates and the stock market has to slow down because that's how the pattern usually goes. But that pattern didn't really happen quite that way despite higher interest rates. So it's almost as if a lot of people continue just investing in the stock market no matter what, like regardless of where interest rates were. And even if some people were tempted by, fixed income yields that were starting to eclipse the rate of inflation. So conceivably, some of us did okay if you made a 5% return on a high yield savings bank account and inflation was maybe at 3%, you still made 2%, but that may not have been as good as if you had made 12% in the stock market after factoring in inflation. So, in some ways, I've been playing defense. Like, I haven't really been trying to invest aggressively. Like, I did a little bit, but I didn't really make many investing moves that I would be, really proud of to say, like, I did my homework. I feel confident in the direction this company is going in. So I think in 2023, I was very like lackadaisical about my investing choices. And I think in this year, I would want to be more proactive and want to, work harder toward an actual investment track record that makes sense. That I could say, I gave at the office, as Warren Buffett would say, because he put his all into it and, there was nothing left to do. So if I have that kind of mindset, I think I would hopefully perform better no matter what the stock market actually does this year, whether it goes up or down on the macro level. I want to have a better outcome this year for myself than just playing defense and sitting in cash a lot.
Yeah, so if we drill down a little bit, one of my investing values that I actually think about through, I have my checklist, right? And I think it's the second or third point on my checklist where it's like, this company matches my personal ethics and values in which way? And then I have to write down, how that company matches my personal values or ethics. And one thing for me that is important is that that there is a woman in the management team. It's something that's important to me. I know that it's very controversial to say things like that, oh, you should find the best candidates and all those things. But to me, as a woman, as having a past career in a company, for me, it's important to see females in management. And I do read their biography. I do, try to track them down and see who are they, because I also want to make sure it's not a woman that's just installed for, okay, we need a female in here. And here's a board member that's a professional board member who we can, put in here, but is really not, putting her full weight into the business. So I do track it, and I really love to see when there's a strong leader of some sort in the management team that's a female who is really a role model. I really like to see that for us females. So I enjoy finding companies like that. It's one of the things that is definitely in my values. And then I also have some companies that I would never look into investing in. And for me, being European and all that, there's something like guns that it's just not something we have a whole lot of here in Denmark, the gun thing and don't feel too great about warfare or guns or anything like that. So I wouldn't invest in companies that, produced anything to support wars or guns, etc. So that's definitely something for me. And then I'm in a mastermind group with someone who I find very inspiring because she said, well, I'm not investing in anything that will make people depend on the product. And I'm like, but that's business. But I really admire her because she has actually managed to find companies that are well run, but where it's not making people dependent. So, an example of something that makes people dependent on their things is a company like Apple, which I like. I like my MacBook and my iPhone, etc., my watch. I have it all, and I really like it and depend on it. But she would never invest in a company that would make someone crave the products. So anything like Meta, for example, she wouldn't invest in either.
Yeah, like it, because it's kind of addictive and you're sort of stuck in that ecosystem once you're part of it. And there's so many people, like speaking of that, I'll be having conversations with some of my friends, and then all of a sudden they take out their phone and start just mindlessly scrolling, and I'll be like, "Hey, like, you were just talking to me." And is it more interesting to see, where someone is on vacation on Insta or TikTok? Like, is that really what's more important than having a one-to-one conversation? So it's amazing how a lot of some of these companies, they're playing into that human psychology aspect of human nature, where if they can get you hooked, like, I think that was also some of the premise of some other companies like Robinhood trying to make their trading app very game-like to get people to do a lot of trades, because that's how they made more money, on making money off the spreads between the bid and ask. So when someone buys and sells a stock or security on a brokerage platform, the broker can make some commission on that, even if there's no commission directly to you. So, you know, there's a lot of financial motivators that some of these companies that introduce addictive functions in their offerings, that how that affects people. So it's interesting you mentioned that, because that definitely makes us think about our own values. So I heard you say, you want to look for a company that actually has meaningful female leadership in either the CEO role or a board member who contributes and is not just a token person just to, check off some quota and, do the whole ESG, environment, social governance, metrics that, it's just sort of like kind of a marketing ploy of, like, companies claiming that they're being more sustainable by having some token person. But if that person doesn't truly have a voice, they're not really able to guide the company maybe in a direction that's better for the future. And that's ultimately what we're looking for as investors, is we want to vote with our money. And every dollar that we might invest somewhere this year, we kind of want to put it toward something that we think is meaningful. And in a lot of companies leadership, they're not yet reflecting some of the modern values maybe that some of us as younger investors we might be looking for. So often it seems that there's a lot of still obstacles in the way to achieving the kind of change that we'd like to see in the future. And I know, it's sort of like a Gandhi quote, like, be the change you wish to see in the world. But it starts with each of us in making that decision. Like, people could be impulse buying. You could be at a store and just being like, ooh, that looks nice. I would like to add that to my collection of shoes, or, whatever kinds of things you like to collect. But if you take a step back and wonder, where were these shoes made? How am I voting with my money? Do I want to invest in a company like Nike? That I just watched this documentary about Nike called Air, based on the Air Jordans that catapulted Nike to become one of the best, athletic and apparel aspirational brands, like, that I know about in terms of athletics and so on. And you have to think about, like, back then, in when Nike was trying to court basketball players and they landed Michael Jordan, they were not even on the same level that Converse and Adidas were with basketball. So interestingly, by believing in what they're doing, Like if you invested in Nike when they were first being traded on the stock market, you would have done well because you could see the vision that some of the leadership had for these shoes that, we're going to go for the best basketball player and he's going to have the most unique shoes. It's not just going to be all the best basketball players wear Converse, but they all have these same values. So it gives you something to think about. What are your values? Do you just want to be a consumer? And that's what a lot of companies play into. So it's part of what I try to be conscientious of. Like I would rather be an investor than a consumer, because if you're just a mindless consumer, you'll be sitting there scrolling through Facebook and maybe feeling bad about yourself because, you see someone on vacation and you're like, I wish I could be there. And there's a lot of somewhat negative effects of social media. It's not just attributed to Facebook, but all the other social media can kind of suck up your time and just sort of make you go nowhere in life. So, as both just a human being and also as an investor, do you value that? You have to ask yourself, do I like the state of society that's just sort of mindlessly scrolling and then shopping impulsively? If someone brings up some fancy cream on the social media and you're like, ooh, I want to buy that cream just because someone I like is touting the benefits of this cream. Like it just, when you think about it, it's just so silly. And, this is a tale as old as time. I'm sure there were other, popular wastes of money in the 80s and all the times before that, people when they were our age were also thinking about. So, you have to really decide what you want your money to go toward. Like, do you believe in a future with fossil fuels? Do you believe in a future that, uses cheap materials and cheap labor around the world to get you the cheapest, latest, greatest thing in the US or Europe? So, a lot of things to consider. And I feel like I've gone on a big, you know, tear about all these things, but I want to give you a chance, Sina, to weigh in with what you think.
It's so awesome. I agree with so many things that you're saying. And for me, regarding Facebook and Meta, just to pick up on that, I feel two things about that business. So privately, it's very odd. And what I'm going to say now also reflects how difficult I feel about the whole Meta thing. But privately, with my own kids and my own time, I don't like social media. I don't like what, it's doing to society, to young people, to us as a society. And at the same time, with my business wouldn't be where it is today without social media. So at the same time, I'm very grateful that I can advertise and get out to so many people around the world, that I for free can update my social media accounts and then get some traffic and people who know about my business. Sort of, like you said, oh, this is the new cream, I'm like that out there on Facebook, right? To make sure that people know that I'm there and I have these services. So yeah, it's an odd feeling of privately not being a huge fan, and then in my business just being a huge fan because of everything I can accomplish with the tools. Yeah, I guess that's what I want to say. And that's also why I haven't invested in Meta. It's because I feel so odd about the business. Again, it's a values thing. Whether or not the business is wonderful, that's not necessarily what we're discussing here. And when I say if the business is wonderful, it's according to Buffett that it has a competitive advantage and great management, etc. That's not what we're talking about here. Right now, we're just talking about ethics. And that's just one of the things where if it's not really something where you 100% say, yes, I believe in this business, you don't even have to look into whether or not it's wonderful, right? So you can already there say, all right, it's not really for me, so I'm not going to dig into the details. And then sometimes there might be businesses where you think, oh, this is something that's within your value system. And then you find out, okay, it's not. And I remember one time, I believe it was a meat packing company or something like that. And Buffett and Munger was discussing how they had been touring the factories because maybe it would be something that, Berkshire Hathaway should buy or buy into or something like that. But they decided, no, that's not for us. So there was something within it, and it was 100% values and ethics there that made them say, no, we're not going to go into this and invest in this business because it doesn't match what we believe. And at the same time, we see Buffett pouring money into oil companies and, things like that, where it's, maybe not necessarily my value, that I wouldn't do that.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, we can see like people like Warren Buffett's values playing out there because they're comfortable investing in oil and gas, but they're not so quick to do the same with tobacco companies or maybe other vice companies. Some people might like to invest in strip clubs. Like I heard, how the stock ticker symbol RIC, I think, had gone up a lot, especially during the pandemic years. And like it's been something that had done well in the markets, but that's a vice kind of company. You have to decide, do you believe in that? Do you think it's okay for society or something good even? Maybe some people might feel a little bit uneasy about tobacco or strip club companies, but maybe some people feel like they're just fine and they're a natural part of society. So, there's some things that you have to weigh ethically. Like we're not saying anything is necessarily right or wrong, but you have to decide that for yourself. Like there's obviously things that you're sort of skirting the line on ethical values. Like for example, when we invest in a broad index fund or any mutual fund that has a bunch of securities in it, some of them could be a company you don't really agree with their ethics. Like what if you don't want to be invested in a company that's sourcing from cheap labor that's being exploited somewhere in the world, and yet that's where you're getting a lot of your apparel or your shoes from. Like, I'm not saying it's any one company that I'm calling out, but what if, by being invested in the S&P 500 index fund, you are voting for more of that in the world and you don't even know it? So, it makes you think about, what are you really invested in, and do you want to be invested in that?
Yeah, 100%. And I agree with, also, I think it's important for our listeners to also hear what you said is, we're not saying one thing or the other is right or wrong. We're just saying, okay, this is something that maybe you should find out with yourself. Maybe you already know what your values and ethics are, and maybe you don't. And it's something that we now inspired you to sit down and think a little bit about and look into as a new thing on your own personal investing checklist or in your own mindset when you go look for companies. And I hope it's been inspirational here with some ideas to consider, or even, if you totally disagree with some of the things that we said, that you say, okay, but I definitely want to invest in XYZ type of business. That's amazing. Congratulations. The most important thing here is that, as Michelle says, that you're voting with your money, and something that we've discussed earlier, it's something that we have from Danielle Town that she has been mentioning, and we really like that kind of expression and to think that way. So it's definitely something that we encourage you to do. So we're coming towards the end of today's episode, and next Tuesday, we'll continue talking about Buffett and Buffett style investing. So we hope that you will join us in a week from now. See you on Tuesday.
Till next time.
If you enjoyed the show and found the content informational, we would be super grateful if you would leave us a review and follow us wherever you get your podcasts, so you automatically get new episodes in your feed. We publish a new show every Tuesday.
The contents of the Investing Mastermind podcast are for educational, informational, and entertainment purposes only. None of this is investing advice, and if you need help in your personal situation, please consult with a professional.